Coming off the holiday season, you may have been lucky enough to get a camera for Christmas, or maybe you've been saving up for months and months waiting for those Boxing Day deals and finally snagged the one that caught your eye. No matter how you scored it, it is very exciting, but you may be wondering where to go from here and kind of how to get started. So I'm going to cover a few steps today that will hopefully kickstart your photo and video journey for you. If you have any questions about anything being covered today, feel free to take advantage of that comment section. There are no stupid questions. All that matters is that you grow and you get better, and I'm more than happy to help you out with that. Before we dive in, don't forget to plug in those camera batteries to charge because you're going to want to go out shooting as soon as we're done here. First things first, go and download a copy of your camera's manual. Now I know we all think that we're too good for the manual. I'm definitely one of those people, but trust me when I say that camera manuals are a little bit different. They contain a lot of information that is specific to your exact camera model. Every camera does things a little bit differently, and you want to make sure you have a copy of this easily accessible when you can't figure out why all your images are blurry or why your camera keeps beeping at you. If you bought your camera new, chances are it came with a physical manual as well, but I still recommend getting the digital version for two reasons. First of all, it's way easier to search. You don't have to go through the table of contents or any sort of glossary index? What is that? You don't have to search through the manual manually to try and find what you're looking for. You can just open it in any PDF reader or even in your web browser and just use Command F or Control F if you're on PC and just search whatever term you're looking for. Not only that, but because it's digital, you can just store a copy of it on your phone and have it ready even when you're on set. This way you're not going to spend 20 minutes freaking out about why all the images you captured are blurry for some stupid reason, like you accidentally set the autofocus zone to only focus on the left side of the frame only. I'm not speaking from experience. How dare you? If you feel so inclined, you can make your way through that manual and read the whole thing, or maybe even leave it as your kind of bathroom literature if that works for you. But I kind of advise against that because there are better and easier ways to get all that information. Which leads us to tip number 2, which is to just look up a video on your camera. There are plenty of videos out there where creators will walk you through the basic functionality and the special features of your specific camera model. As a result, probably the quickest and easiest way to get to know your camera is just to load up one of these videos, get a nice hot beverage, and sit back and have someone teach it all to you instead of you trying to teach yourself. A quick search for your camera model plus beginner's guide or walkthrough or tutorial will end up delivering a ton of awesome results to your beautiful, beautiful face. While this is obviously great and totally free, I do recommend going to Caleb at DSLR Video Shooter. He has a ton of really in-depth video guides breaking down everything about these cameras. And I actually picked up his guide when I got this Blackmagic 6K camera. It's awesome and he takes you through absolutely everything. So if you want the extra detail and something that's just all-encompassing, it's worth spending a few bucks and getting one of those. Tip number 3 is about storage. Most new cameras do not come with any kind of memory card, so it's up to you to make sure that you get the right one for your camera. You'll need to know 2 things. First of all, what kind of storage media your device takes. So that could be an SD card, compact flash, micro SD, or even an external hard drive. And then you also need to know how fast that storage media needs to be. Most beginner to intermediate cameras just take a standard SD card, but if you're unsure, you can look for a hatch either on the side or the bottom of your camera that will open up and you'll see the slots as well as usually some text next to it marking what kind of storage media it uses. In terms of speed, there's a lot of confusing terminology like megabits versus megabytes and class 10, all these terms that you really don't need to know that well, especially at this point. Once again, your best bet is just a quick search. If you look online for your camera name and memory card, you'll find a ton of results with people letting you know their recommendations for both the brand and the model of card at a ton of different price points and size capacities as well. One very important thing to note here is that some cameras, like the Sony a6300 I have here, will let you use SD cards that aren't that fast, but it will lower the video quality to compensate for that. So you may get away with using slower storage media with your camera, but you might not be getting the best quality as a result. I'm not aware of any camera where you'd see a restriction on the quality of the photos, but if you do have a burst function like this does, then it might just stop taking photos after a certain amount of time, or it'll just take forever to process those photos before you can actually see what you've shot. But once again, a quick online search should solve all those issues for you. Tip number 4 is the exposure triangle. When it comes to actually capturing images, this is fundamental knowledge that you need to know, but I promise it's not as complicated to figure out as it sounds. It'll teach you first and foremost how to take images that aren't too bright or too dark. But in addition to that, it's also going to give you some of the basics about how to get creative and how to get a certain style of image that you might want. Now, every camera uses the exposure triangle system, so it doesn't matter if you're using a cheap budget DSLR or a $50,000 cinema camera. They all follow these same principles of the exposure triangle, so it's really important that you get started with this knowledge early. Now, there is a mode on your camera called auto, which will do all of this for you just to get the right exposure without you having to worry about what settings to use. But trust me, you want to give that up as soon as possible if you really want to have full creative control over your images. The thing is, the camera can't read your mind. It doesn't know what kind of image you want. So even if it gets the exposure right, maybe you wanted a really blurry background, but you just wanted that one object in focus. Well, it doesn't know that. Auto mode can't make creative decisions. That's up to you. And even though it can get the exposure right, it will still screw that up plenty of times, trust me. Understanding how the exposure triangle works is the knowledge you need to ditch auto mode forever and go over to manual mode, which is exactly what all the pros use and how they craft the images that they like. I don't want to take too much time out of this video to explain the exposure triangle, so I'm just going to leave a link in the description where you can learn more about it in a really thorough and detailed way. So bookmark that link for later and we'll come back to it. Tip number 5 is about taking care of your gear. Cameras and lenses are not cheap, so as a result, we want to make sure we're doing our best to really take care of them. Buying a cleaning kit should be a priority because they're ridiculously cheap to put together, and they're going to be really important in making sure you get clean and clear images. After shooting for a while, you may find that your lens gets some dirt or some dust on it, and this can actually show up in your images as little black dots. If you're lucky, you can get rid of them with a little bit of handiwork in post, but if it's in a video, it's way harder. And honestly, it's just super time consuming. So you wanna make sure that you're cleaning your lens regularly to avoid this issue. A basic cleaning kit consists of just 3 things. First is gonna be a cleaning cloth, like you would use on a pair of glasses, for example. The second is gonna be a lens pen, which gives you 2 different types of tools for a little bit grittier cleaning. And lastly, just have a little puffer or a blower that you can use to clean the sensor. The cleaning cloth is just for the everyday kind of stuff. Every time you take your camera out to use it or a different lens, just give it a quick brush and same thing before you put it away. That'll handle small things like dust and such, but if you've got something that needs a little bit more elbow grease, that's where the lens pen comes in. Anything that might have gotten stuck on there or dried on there should come off with the lens pen. If you're seeing blemishes in your images and you've already cleaned all your lenses and you know they're not the problem, there may be a speck of dust on the sensor, but all you need to do to clean it is remove the lens, face the sensor face down so any debris can fall out, and then just take a few puffs with the blower. It'll blow any debris around inside and let it fall out. Do not touch the sensor. Don't poke it, don't rub it, don't even look at it. Don't even look at it. It's delicate. Do not mess with it. Just use the blower to clean it. If you need anything more extreme than that, then maybe go to a professional. So we've covered the technical stuff and a little bit of basic housekeeping, but now, how do we actually get good at using this thing? Start by doing an exercise on how to choose the right lens. Choosing the right lens for a shot is a huge part of the creative aspect of photography and videography. So it's really important that you get acquainted with why you might choose a really wide angle lens versus a really tight lens. That choice doesn't just dictate how much of the scene that we're actually seeing, but it also changes how our subject looks and how an image can feel. Most of the time, a new camera is going to come with what's called a kit lens. It's basically just a cheap all-around lens that can be used for most applications pretty well, and it usually has a zoom range on it. Take the camera out into the world and go practice with it, but restrict yourself to just one focal length the entire time. For example, the Canon Rebel series cameras usually have a kit lens that's an 18 to 55 millimeter. So go out, set it to 18, and only take photos on 18. Then go out and try the same thing with something like 55 millimeters or even 35 millimeters. you're gonna see that these photos feel and look very different. If you like, you can even take the same subject and shoot them at different focal lengths, and you'll start to see what the differences are between them. You'll notice that if you shoot on a wide angle like an 18mm, the background looks way further away. Whereas if you shoot on a 35, the background looks much closer to your subject, even though nothing else has changed. You'll also notice that if you shoot a person on 18mm, you have to get really close for them to fill up the whole frame, and they look kind of funny. Their nose is all big, but if you shoot them again on the 55mm, everything's very much proportionate and they look a lot more flattering. This is one of those basic essential skills you should start learning as soon as possible. How your focal length is going to affect what the image looks like and how it feels. It may seem a little lame to do, but this kind of purposeful practice is really going to skyrocket your knowledge right out of the gate. Our last tip is about photo styles. Once you know how the exposure triangle works, you can go out and start making creative decisions with your photos that don't involve the focal length necessarily. Start messing around with the extreme ranges of each of the settings in your exposure triangle. Crank your shutter speed up all the way and you'll notice that any sort of motion in your frame is just perfectly crystal clear. But if you lower that way down, you start to see lots of blurred lines, which can be a cool creative technique. If you open up your aperture all the way, you're gonna get this really blurry background. But if you tighten it up, everything in the image will be in focus. Start practicing with these different settings so that you can start to learn how to create the style of photo that you want. If you want something crisp and clean, or if you want something with a blurry background, you know what settings to go to in order to get a style that you want. You can start making creative decisions instead of just figuring out, well, how does my camera work? Those two exercises alone are gonna make it so much easier for you to know how to set your camera for different shooting circumstances, whether it's fast-paced action and sports, or it's just some nice laid-back portrait photography. Now you should have pretty much everything that you need in order to go out there and start getting better both at the technical and the creative aspects of photography and videography. If you found this helpful, please subscribe for more content like this. And again, if you have any questions at all, just hit me up in the comments. I'm more than happy to help you out. Otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Happy shooting.